says it's live.
All right, y'all. Y'all know the drill. Just hang tight. As always, I've got to post the link to everything on our various outlets here. I actually think I found an easier way to do that. So hopefully we can get this done quick. If you're already on here, you can go ahead and get in line. And obviously, if you have any questions, we'd love to hear them. Just like we did last week, we'll be talking a little bit about the current Gamecock events while also sort of letting you steer the questions and letting you kind of talk about, we'll talk about whatever you want us to talk about. Let's see. I got one more thing I got to do, y'all, and then we should be ready to go. Like I said, y'all just hang tight. One more second. Gotta make sure everything goes up on the Twitters as well. Definitely appreciate y'all joining us again if you're already on there. And give me one more second. What'd you think of the Mayo Bowl being added to the pantheon of big bowls today, Chris?
I'm all for it. I think it's fantastic. A fantastic name and a fantastic condiment as well.
I've got to go check my poll on YouTube. Did you see my poll?
I voted in your poll.
You voted?
Yeah, I voted. I registered to vote. I voted in your poll.
What are we at right now? Have you seen?
No, I haven't checked it since this morning. I'll give a live update for the people if you want. It's very important. So right now, mayonnaise, good or UGG, 238 votes. It's a good sample size. 61.8% are good.
Okay.
And the people that are wrong are 38.2%. So people that are wrong, of course, are saying mayonnaise is no good. I thought our buddy Paul Strelo made a great point. Strelo said, mayonnaise, like he didn't understand the hate for it today because it's also a great base for other sauces, right?
Yeah.
So you can make all sorts of stuff on a mayonnaise base. Aside from just, Chipotle mayonnaise, stuff like that, but also all sorts of different sauces with mayonnaise as the base. So, and Wes, if you've ever made the ranch at home with the packet, like the Hidden Valley stuff, it has mayonnaise in it.
Well, and if you make it at home with the packet, it's actually, I would say, scientifically 1,000 times better than.
At least, yes. Scientific evidence.
Why
is that? I don't get it.
It's got to be some type of preservatives that are in. And I think it's because, dude, if you're making it at home, at least if it's me, I'm using Duke's mayonnaise.
Yeah.
So you probably got some crappy mayonnaise that
that's true.
That Hidden Valley is using.
Yeah.
So to me, that's probably the issue there. But I want to make just like legit homemade ranch, man. Like with your own herbs and spices. Because
you ever do that, you better bottle some and I'll buy it from you.
Because if you at least for me, the restaurants, you can tell the difference between the ones that have legit homemade ranch.
Yes.
And not, which, by the way, we're going to do our first live food review for a local local business.
I can't wait. Aside from the fact that I'm not an active participant, I'm really excited about it. So
Yeah, we've talked about doing that for a while. Okay, all right, y'all. We're gonna stop blabbering. Well, I guess all we really do is blabber anyway. But I got all the links set up, I think, so we can get rolling and talk a little bit about what's going on in Gamecock land, and of course, we'll take your questions as well. I don't have you guys pulled up, so I can't tell if anybody is already in the mix on here or not. But I appreciate y'all joining us again. Of course, I'm Wes Mitchell. He is Chris Clark. And we actually were able to give away. Oh, yeah, we got a couple people on here already. What's up, David? What's up, Craig? We hit 3,000 subscribers last week on the YouTube page. And so we did some giveaways. Gave away one free 6-month subscription. And then a couple people actually reached out to me, and I ended up hooking them up with a couple months as well. So we do give away things. I'm going to try to maybe get some gift cards for you guys as well. Maybe we can give away for the people who are joining us regularly on the YouTube, just to kind of, reward you. And hopefully, I guess we'll set the next standard at 3,500. Hopefully there's going to be some exponential growth here, and it won't be that long for the next 500 folks. So when we get to 3,500, we will give away some more free time on Gamecock Central. What's up, Wesley? Somebody else comment. Yes, throw your comment. Tell us what's going on in your world. Where are you from? Where are you joining us from today? And obviously, if you're on social media, help us share this, because we are trying to grow the YouTube page, and hit the subscribe button there as well. But Chris, plenty of stuff going on. Recruiting never ends, and South Carolina with 2 commits this week. I would say a little bit of news in the football world with the new, I guess, schedule for sort of the return to actual football practice was, I guess, approved, you would say, yesterday. And recruiting never really stops. So I guess we'll start there with Jaden Johnson committing earlier this week. What were your thoughts on Jaden, man?
man, I think Jaden's a really intriguing prospect. He's a guy that, if you want to get really technical about it, could be an athlete, really classified in that athlete category. And South Carolina thinks he could play a variety of positions too. But really what they honed in on as a staff was his upside as a defensive back. And so, Travaris Robinson and Will Muschamp obviously were heavily involved there. And they think that he has potential to be, really he could play anywhere in the secondary, but he has the look of a guy that could come in and be a true safety. He played a lot of quarterback last year. He's got experience playing DB, played corner in high school, and he's played receiver. So positionally, he's very versatile. He's a really interesting athlete. We've seen a lot of defensive backs. Stephon Gilmore, for example, comes to mind, who have successfully made that transition from high school quarterback, or even at least a guy who's played some high school quarterback, moving over to defensive back. But what you like about Jaden is physically, he's got a lot of tools. Is he a finished product, especially when you're projecting him to safety? No. But he's got length. He's a guy that's rangy. He's got a guy that's got a physical disposition. He looks really, really well put together. I mean, physically, he's going to be one of the more impressive prospects in the class, I think.
Well, man, I think we've heard. I mean, we've both seen the reaction, and people are, and I get it, rightfully so. Everybody's still disappointed off, last season, the way everything went, and this idea of South Carolina's had a run of 3 stars and stuff like that. But I'm not going to sit here and say, every school in the country, let's be honest, every coaching staff thinks they're getting guys that can help their program. So I'm not going to sit here and say, well, all these guys should be 4 or 5 star prospects. But I will say, I think right now, Chris, the recruiting process in general, I would say the recruiting industry, as far as rankings, is probably more wait and see than it has ever been, just because of the situation that everybody's in right now. There were no normal, like, business camps. I'm talking Rivals Under Armour, the opening, all these different camps that kids could go to. Then June, right now, actually, I'll go back even before that. This spring, that's when coaches and recruiting guys would be watching players at their spring practices in high school. That didn't take place. Now, June, you and I would have been at a South Carolina camp for 10 days this month during a normal time, and they would have rolled through literally over 1,000 kids during that time that the staff would have gotten more of a look at, but that people like you and me could have gotten a look at as well. So right now, if you're a coaching staff, you have to make the decision based on incomplete information. Do we go ahead and go in on this guy, or do we wait and potentially lose out on him? So I think the combination of where things are as a recruiting industry, where South Carolina's season was last year, if you're South Carolina, you've got to find some Jaden Johnson, some guys that we know is a premium athlete. We know you're having to project him a little bit, but he has played DB. This isn't one of these guys who
right
is like a quarterback only. This isn't, Kenny McKinley coming in and transitioning completely from quarterback to wide receiver. I mean, you see guys all the time make that transition and make it pretty smoothly anyway. Plus, he's got a background there. I want to know what he actually steps on a scale at, man, because he's listed 196. I've heard he's over 200 pounds. He looks to be maybe already 210 or so if you just watch the film. So he's a big kid. I even think he could potentially grow into a linebacker, but I think if you're gonna miss by just going out and getting athletes, guys that have some positional versatility, and some guys. I like the basketball film too, man. I watched his basketball huddle tape, and just very smooth, very athletic. Just his body control, dexterity is for a guy that size is very impressive. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, man, this guy 100% is should be a 4-star guy. But considering everything, you're going to have to build your roster sometimes with some 3-star guys, but that doesn't mean they're bad football players.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, 3-star guy, look, if you're a 3-star guy, you're deemed to have pro potential, so doesn't mean you have as much as a 4 or 5-star in terms of that high upset, first 4 rounds, first round of the draft. No. And of course, not every 3-star is going to reach that pro threshold. Neither will every 4 or 5-star. But these are guys who are projected to have an impact at the college level. So the idea that, again, like a 3-star is some negative is certainly not the case. And I think, again, it is, like you said, Wes, really difficult to get a read on guys at a really unique time like this, where we don't have camps, we don't have eval periods. We've seen a lot of college coaches do some of these virtual school visits, not on campus, but meaning they're hitting up coaches during that what's typically the in-person spring evaluation period and just gathering information on kids. But it's not quite the same. Obviously for South Carolina and others, feedback from the prospects, coaches, or even opposing coaches in the area, is always going to be significant, but even more so this year, and even more so on the film. And so the point you made about grabbing athletes is a good one, particularly in this class, and particularly a defensive back, because Will Muschamp's talked about this a lot. Defensive back film can really lie a lot of times. Sometimes it's bad tape. Sometimes a kid isn't even on the screen. Sometimes it's grainy. You can't really get a good sense for it. But what you can get a sense of on Jaden Johnson's film is what type of athlete is he? And does he have the traits does he have the traits to successfully be able to make that transition? Then you can fill in the blanks by talking to his coaches, talking to opposing coaches, getting a feel for his mental makeup by talking to the kid. And then you feel, good about the decision. Do you want to see as many kids as possible in camp? Absolutely. But, even kids that South Carolina's seen in the past in camp, say as juniors, sophomores, freshmen, you always want to see that progression and see as many kids as you can. But, it's just a different ball game for every school this particular cycle.
Well, man, I think you want to put a stopwatch on them too. You want to see You want to measure them in. You want to see, have they grown? You want to see, are they faster or slower than they were before? You want to see their lateral quickness. I mean, there's a lot that comes because, they've talked about it. They're looking, they have certain standards from a testing standpoint that they're looking at positionally. And I think that's something you would love to see that you just can't right now. So you are relying on information, but we've seen guys in the past, Chris, we've seen guys that came in hyped up, by the recruiting industry and go to camp and they get chopped off the board basically, or go and you realize this guy is slow or this guy is not near as athletic as he looks on film. So that there is sort of some danger there with these type of things, but everybody is dealing with it. So if you're South Carolina, you got to find a way to go get athletes. And, I think this offseason recruiting wise has sort of just been about surviving. We've talked about it and getting to the season and hoping that, you can have a better season than last year and then using that to parlay it into recruiting. So I would say the other side of this is that the people who are extremely worried about recruiting right now, I would say, hey, we tried to warn you that this was not going to be a super flashy class. That doesn't mean you can't get good players. We all know you need difference makers. I think they signed, I think, some really good difference makers. Arguably, this past class might have been their best class since Muschamp got here. They've signed some difference makers. Is this class going to be chock full of major difference makers that are highly rated 5-star, 4-star guys? Probably not, but that doesn't mean you can't get good players who fit your culture, fit what you're wanting to do. And then you just, if you're a South Carolina fan, you hope that you can get the season, get the program back on track, and then parlay it into future strong classes, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you made a good point. Look, there's a certain reality that South Carolina is facing, and sometimes when we bring this up, say, well, everybody's dealing with the pandemic. That's true, but you do have to face the reality that South Carolina's coming off a very poor season last year. In year 4, it is what it is. It happened. So there's that to deal with. There's the fact that, again, sort of broken record, but you gotta say these things if you're talking about, hey, why is the class like this? Why are these circumstances like this? Muschamp was very publicly placed on the hot seat by the administration. They tried to walk it back, etc. But it created this certain perception. And as we know, as we've seen in the past, other schools are going to pounce on that. Then South Carolina doesn't have this historical backdrop of a Georgia, for instance, to say, hey, we won titles in the past. We're not that far off. We'll get back there quickly, etc. There's not that historical tradition. Then you count, South Carolina isn't necessarily going to sign 10 guys in state every year. Under Muschamp, they've had a low number of guys. They've had sort of in the middle, and they've had a higher number of guys in state. The key is just getting good players wherever they are. And when you got guys in state, you need to get them if they can help you, and they're really good players. So there's only a handful of them this cycle. So that means out of state is important. So, for the Gamecocks, what they need, I think the best medicine is to get to the season, win some games. That'll give you the stability that you need to get it back on track. Stay in the game with some guys, whether they're committed to other schools or whether they're uncommitted. Try to stay in the game because some of these early commitments, we're just not sure if they're going to stick or not. Not talking about South Carolina, but just from a national, regional standpoint, how many guys are going to take other visits whenever in-person recruiting gets reopened? Probably a lot, assuming that it gets reopened in some form or fashion during the season or even right after the season.
Yeah, definitely. So, all right, I see we got some folks on here. So go ahead, throw your questions in the chat or just direct the conversation if you want. And we'll sort of talk about whatever you want to talk about. And we're going to talk a little bit about Jordan Davis as well. But, dude, I got to tell everybody about what I got yesterday. And this is actually, I'd love to do some paid ads on here. Just being honest, this is not a paid ad. This is just, I've been hearing about Silver Spoon on my Instagram forever. And ever since COVID, they only do pre-orders and I keep missing the pre-order. So I finally hit the pre-order and I was not disappointed. I do want to try and I've already had lunch, so I'm not gonna eat these because it'd be a mess. But dude, so biscuits with cheddar and bacon baked in. They come as fours. Outstanding. My breakfast this morning, I threw this bad boy in the oven, cut it in half, scrambled up an egg, threw that on top, and then threw some hot sauce on there. Money. So
That sounds awesome.
Silver Spoon Bake Shop. Biscuit was awesome. They have a pimento cheese biscuit.
Oh,
This is over on Divine Street. Man, Divine Street these days is hopping. Like they have so many good restaurants and businesses over there now. And I'm glad I don't live far away. But dude, you know I got a sweet tooth.
yes.
You know I got a bad sweet tooth.
It's really bad.
Dude, check this thing out.
Oh.
So this is chocolate cookie, chocolate icing with chunked sea salt on top. Now, this I really liked it. Also, probably a little controversial for some people. I'm never gonna steer you wrong on here. Let me tell you, if you love sweets, like love sweets and love chocolate, you like chocolate covered pretzels, so you like the sweet and the saltiness, this is your jam. Now, if you can eat more than one of these at the time, you are a better man than me because it is heavy, like strong chocolate. It's basically like a chocolate brownie with a little bit of that saltiness to sort of balance it out and chase it, I guess. But they're pretty heavy on the salt. So if you like that sort of salt with your chocolate, then this thing is money.
All right. Is the cookie soft? Medium?
Medium. Yeah, it's like, I mean, it's a cookie texture. It's not like chewy, like a brownie necessarily, but it's got some depth to it. Like the chocolate, it's got some very, like, I don't know what type of chocolate they use, but it's got some depth to it's like a deep, like dark chocolatey note to it. But Silver Spoon, one of my good friends, she swears by their sugar cookies.
I'd be down.
Which if you want something that's a little more tame and not that heavy, I'd go with the sugar cookies. Like I said, I want to try some of their other biscuits. They have a blueberry biscuit that has like white icing on top, which I guess is kind of like a bowberry biscuit type thing.
Yeah.
That's my next trial. But I've been trying to eat pretty well, man, now, but I had to try these things. So Silver Spoon, appreciate the hospitality yesterday, man. They've just sort of, you got to do the thing online. You got to get in early on their Instagram, and then you just go up there and they just throw these boxes at you. So it's pretty good. They're on my list that you need to try next.
Okay. It's a big list. My list is growing, but I'm definitely on it. So you've already sold me directly, and I'll be making a stop there at some point. Now, I have a follow-up. Now, for those that don't know, Wes has a brownie rating system. I assume there's one for a cookie as well.
It's for all sweets.
Oh, okay. So it's 1 through 10, and it has to be a what again for you to consider eating?
7.
Has to be a 7 out of a 10. Okay.
So and
that obviously passed.
It passed.
Yeah.
Here's how it works. If I'm in like trying to eat well mode, but let's say you're at a catered event, there's food everywhere. The food's been really good. They always put some cookies or brownie or banana pudding or something at the end of the catered buffet.
Yes.
And you've been trying to eat well, right? But it's free sweets. So you have to have a system. And the system is, if you're there with Chris Clark, you let Chris eat it first. Mm-hmm. And then say, hey, man, 1 to 10.
Yeah. It's a good strategy.
If it's above a 7, it's worth the calories. Just work a little bit harder at the gym. Maybe eat a little bit less next meal. You're fine. If it's under 7, don't even mess with it. Just leave it. You're good. There's no point in eating. There's no point in wasting your sweets and your empty calories on a dry, nasty cookie. So if they just got those y'all know what I'm talking about, those just bland, plain, non-homemade, boxed, bought BS chocolate chip cookies. No,
Yeah.
you don't have
Now,
to.
I think another key to your system too is you gotta make sure that whoever you're utilizing is like your wingman. Obviously, you got to be like on the same page.
So Colin Taylor can't
I
be.
was gonna say Colin is a no, no, no. I mean, I don't know his sweet food takes. I assume they're awful, just like the other ones. But
He
his
doesn't like
regular,
banana pudding. I'll tell you that.
he doesn't like banana pudding.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, all right. Sorry, all right, guys. We're
Yeah.
getting off track. We're pulling a Pearson here. Jay Reeves has a question for us, Chris. I
All
hope
right, let's go.
you're still hanging in there. QB1 over under 20 passing touchdowns this year.
Oh,
What?
good question.
I'm bad with stats. Like if it comes to, I remember what my eyes saw, but I'm bad at remembering. Okay, did this guy have this many touchdowns
Right.
3 years ago? Did this have? I mean, 20 touchdowns, in my opinion, is not like some crazy barrier
Mm-mm.
to have to hit. But I mean, you have to have had a pretty good season to get that too. So I'm for some perspective, I'm pulling up Jake Bentley's numbers in his career at South Carolina. Because Jake obviously was a long-time quarterback for South Carolina. And obviously he took a lot of heat from South Carolina fans as well. So let's see. Obviously last year is a wash because he got injured game 1. All right. 2018, just for perspective, 2018, Jake Bentley threw 27 touchdowns. 2017, he threw 18. In 2016, the year that he took over, midway through, he threw 9. So, Chris, 20 touchdowns this year for South Carolina starting quarterback. I don't remember. I don't have it in front of me. Do you remember what Helinski had last year?
Yeah, he had 11.
What I thought it was about 11. So 9 more for Ryan Helinski this year with a full season under his belt, assuming Ryan Helinski is the guy. So QB1,
Yeah.
20 touchdowns this year.
I would go over. I don't think it's going to be a ton more than that. You know, like a push or over would be my vote if I had to go one way or the other. Here's why. You know, so that 2018 number that you referenced, Jake Bentley, I mean, he had some really good games that year, and the Gamecock offense had some pretty good performances that year too. They were up and down some, you know, obviously. Yeah, too many interceptions. So that's one thing. You look at 2017, that offense was not that explosive, you know, and he threw 18, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, Helinski missed. He threw 11 last year. He obviously didn't play in the opener. He had a really poor game against Missouri. He did not play for about 1.5, 2 quarters against Georgia. So, you know, I feel like, you know, and then at the end of the year, obviously the wheels had come off offensively. And so there wasn't much of anything happening offensively. So I just feel like if you give, you know, a little bit of a projection and of, you know, hey, maybe the offense on the whole is a little better in terms of consistency. And then he takes a little bit of a step forward and he's healthy and he plays in 12 to 13 games. Mm-hmm. I can see it, you know, because that's not even, you know, that's not even averaging 2 touchdowns a game. It's a little under. And so I feel like if he even has a game with 3 and then there's 1 here, you know, you feel like he can get there.
Yeah. And obviously we're assuming a full season there. All right, David, I see your question. I'm gonna get Russell's question, then we're gonna come right back to it because we were gonna head that direction in a second anyway. And I want to pull up Jordan Davis's highlights when we talk about him. So we'll hit Russell first. Chris, last year, a lot of our recruits screamed up the charts as their high school senior season progressed. They were able to go to camps. Has that been a trend in Muschamp's classes or just last year? You know, I think there has been a trend of them getting in on guys early on that ultimately, Chris, have ended up either going up as far as rankings go or just going up as far as the number of schools that are chasing them. You know, we've heard several guys that South Carolina, has either landed or just have been after, that they've been recruiting hard for this class, where it's sort of been like, man, if this guy would have been able to get to camps or be seen a little bit more, he's probably, a little more highly recruited, that he's probably a little more well-known. So I think that has been a bit of a trend. And, coaching staffs, they copycat, man. I mean, part of it is if an SEC school offers a guy, and they're the first SEC offer, I think just in general, other schools, they owe it to themselves to take another look at a kid. So I do think that's a factor, both just logistically, like human nature, and because I do think Muschamp and these guys do sometimes get in on guys before other kids, or before other schools, I should say.
That you mentioned, the whole scholarship aspect of the offer list. I think that's the one to me that stands out more than the ranking, because there are a few guys I can think of that moved up in the rankings that South Carolina ended up landing, that the Gamecocks were in on, and it wasn't always right after they committed. Like one that comes to mind was Rick Sandage. He eventually moved up to where he was in, I think, the top 50, top 40 of the Rivals 100, but he didn't commit until February. And so I think he was sort of already in that range. For example, Zach Pickens became a 5-star somewhat, if I'm not mistaken, Wes, somewhat earlier in the process. We did see Ryan Helinski move up, some during the process, going back to the 19 class. Obviously, Marshawn Lloyd was a 5-star, then a 4-star, then a 5-star, because he was always so close. Even when he dropped down to a 4-star for a little while, he was really close. Jordan Birch was always a 5, but he was sort of adjusted. But I think the offer list point that you made was an even bigger one, because we've seen a ton of guys, and now South Carolina doesn't sign all of them, obviously, but they have a pretty good track record of getting in early on guys. And a lot of guys that they end up signing, that helps substantially. You look at Birch and Pickens, two guys I mentioned, for example. South Carolina was in on them very early. I mean, Will Muschamp knew about those guys as soon as he got to South Carolina, and pretty much, and started prioritizing them at the appropriate time shortly after he got to South Carolina, a little bit after. And so, yeah, there's a bunch of those. And I think that's an area where they do a good job of identifying guys early and getting them on campus early. Obviously, landing them is something you got to do. And I think they progressively built on that, to where I'll agree with what you said earlier, Wes. I think the 20 class was, the best one that they've signed top to bottom. And certainly when you look at up top, at the star power difference maker type of guys.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So we had a question about Jordan Davis, so we're going to get into him as well. And I'm going to cut this segment and post it on our YouTube separately. So I'm going to sort of intro it a little bit as well, differently than sort of the other ones that we've done. But obviously, again, Wes Mitchell here, Chris Clark, talking about South Carolina's newest commitment. That is Jordan Davis, who actually committed on Monday. Unofficially, I guess you'd say, committed to the staff. Will Muschamp put out his Spurs up at the time. Jordan Davis wanted to wait before putting it out publicly that he was the commitment, and actually looked like at one point it was going to be next week before he committed, but he did decide to go ahead. We're recording this here on Thursday live, and went ahead and put it out on Wednesday that he's a Gamecock. He's committed to South Carolina, and a kid I think, again, sort of fits it's the same mold, it's the same idea as with Jaden Johnson. Obviously, very different players, different positions, but taking sort of a raw athlete. We've seen Eric Wolford sort of, because different coaches at their positions prioritize different skill sets and different things and different qualities. We've seen Eric Wolford say, I want to take a guy who's maybe a little bit more raw, not quite as developed, needs some more seasoning, but is super athletic, maybe over the guy who's not quite as athletic, but is a little bit further along, I think, as a player at that given time. Because you can't have both. If you have both, then that's like a 5-star guy. If they're super athletic, already developed, they're just made to play, that's a 5-star. So if you're not going to get that guy, then I think you have to go out and sort of choose one or the other. And this is sort of the way South Carolina has gone with it. But Chris, I think Jordan Davis, actually, there are some similarities to the situation with Jordan Rhodes from the same school, who is of course a redshirt junior that started, I think it was 10 games for South Carolina last year. So this is a big athletic. You see him right here moving in space. I mean, a guy that big, just very light on his feet. And but I do think there's a lot of similarities here with Jordan Rhodes.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, Jordan Rhodes sort of that later bloomer type, where he ended up picking up a lot of offers later in the process. And you're right. This is a guy that, he's still a little raw. Talking to some coaches around the area that have seen him play on the field live, they talk a lot about, obviously the size stands out when you look at him at 6'5", 290 or so. But they talk about his athleticism, his length, and the fact that he is still raw. I mean, that's something that you see on film. But I think you made a great point about what Wolford looks for. Can a guy move? Can he bend? You're not going to see Wolford take a lot of guys that are these plotting types, just a big dude. You're not going to see that a lot. He's going to place a premium on athleticism, even if it's a guy that's a little quote unquote undersized. We've also seen him take some big dudes who can move too. Jordan's one of those. You look at Jadson Turnitine, he's massive, but he can also move a lot. And that's why he may end up playing this year. So I think Jordan Davis is going to be a guy that he's not going to be an instant impact, I don't think, unless he has to. I don't think you're going to see him play in year one like a Jalen Nichols, or a Dylan Wanham, for example. But there's a lot to like in terms of sort of that blank canvas with some of the attributes that he already brings to the field that are just natural. And then Wolford can take him and sort of mold him and make him a little bit more aggressive and, teach him, the technical side of playing offensive line.
Yeah, I think with this position, man, you have to, and South Carolina's not going to take a big class this year, but in general, you just have to take a bunch of guys. And we've seen them take, 5 or 6 guys each class. You have to take a bunch of guys that have a chance. And then, dude, you just have to know some of them aren't going to turn out. Like, it is a developmental position all the way. And you just have to get enough guys that have the upside to play at this level and develop and do your best to develop them. And just know some are going to pan out, some aren't. And, I think, I think Jordan Davis is maybe a little bit more tuned to probably play tackle, whereas Jordan Rhodes a little bit bigger, ends up inside at guard, obviously. But yeah, I mean, the kid, and you look, he's another example, hasn't really visited many places. He visited Georgia Tech. They offered after seeing him in person. South Carolina got some fresh film on him recently and decided to offer. And then, this thing happened very quickly because South Carolina got the new film. They offered him on Monday. He commits to the staff that day. And then he goes public, on Wednesday, a couple of days later. So this one happened very quick. And, I think you just look, the long arms, the frame. He has the skill set. He has the qualities you're looking for, I should say. And now you just have to develop the skill set if you're Eric Wolford. And like you said, but Chris, I think to go a little bit more big picture, they've kind of gotten themselves in a spot on the offensive line, especially at tackle, where, they've recruited well. They have like a veteran in Dylan Wanham. They have a JUCO who's come in, and Muschamp has said in some of these radio interviews that Jazz would be your starting left tackle if they started the season today. Then, you've got Jalen Nichols, Ja'Kai Moore, I think, are the future of that position at tackle. So really, I think they've put themselves in a spot to take some guys like this and let them develop and not be, unless you have some crazy run of injuries, not sort of be forced to throw them, throw them to the wolves, so to speak.
Yeah, and you supplement that with the fact that South Carolina is not scared to take a junior college guy like Jadson Turnitine. I mean, was it completely necessary for them to take him last year? From a roster standpoint, maybe not, because aside from Wanham, like you said, you've got a Ja'Kai Moore and a Jalen Nichols on the roster, maybe another guy or two that you feel okay about playing at tackle, but you take good players. And so, you're able to take him. Now you got probably 4 guys, that you feel good about at tackle. You're not in a bad situation if you have an injury, and you can play some of those other guys that are a little bit younger, with Jazz being a junior, the other two being sophomores, and continue to bring them along in your program to where they're ready to step in the following year and be the full-time guys, assuming that's how it all plays out. But yeah, I think what you hit on in terms of just feeling good about the roster, a lot of people said, well, gosh, aren't you supposed to take 4 to 5 offensive linemen every year? And in a general sense, that's a good idea because it is so developmental and it's a little bit more of a crapshoot. But I think it just illustrates that A, maybe there's some other positions that are bigger needs in this class, and B, that they do feel good about not only tackle, but just offensive line as a whole. And that, they're going to have 15 back, I think, next year. 4 of them will be seniors. In addition to that, guys like Justin Turrentine and Dylan Wanham, for example, Eric Douglas being another one. And so you feel good about the numbers and you feel good about the talent. I think they feel like they've hit on a lot of the young guys that they brought into the program. They still feel pretty good about.
That, of course, again, Gamecocks brand new commitment, Jordan Davis, who went public on Wednesday. So, all right, Chris, let's go a little big picture with that, and let me see if we got any more questions on here before I sort of shift gears. Let's see, we do have some other questions. So, all right, we're going to get to those in a second. All right, so big picture, we can kind of start to see the foundation of the class playing out as far as numbers go. So I know quarterback, you're pretty set. You already have your guy there. Running back, they have 1 guy committed. I expect them to take 2. I'm looking at offensive line, and I'm seeing, okay, probably going to take 2 total. Now 1 guy has committed. How do you sort of see this other spot playing out? Because I've got 2 guys in mind. I think Cedric Nicely has really, in my opinion, probably been a South Carolina lean for months. But then you have Anthony Belton, if they do want to go the JUCO route, who they just offered on Monday as well at GMC. And I'm hearing, right now, South Carolina has positioned themselves in a really good spot with him too. So you actually have now for South Carolina, we've talked about how other schools have been able to say, hey, we've only got a couple spots left at a certain spot. Now South Carolina has sort of fallen into that spot on the offensive line.
They do. And it's not a situation where you're poised or want to pressure a guy, but they can just lay out the reality of, hey, we've got this 1 spot left. We want you, but hey, if another guy commits, it sort of is what it is. And so, I think there are a few guys on that board that South Carolina does like. Belton is one, the junior college guy, and he's someone that, the impression that he sort of just cropped up, that some may have because he just got offered, or maybe it has to do with other targets. Not necessarily. He's a guy that they've recruited for a while and they've liked for a while and sort of been watching him and felt good enough to pull the trigger on the offer recently. But, he's certainly one. Nicely, as you mentioned. I think Charles Armstrong out of Florida is certainly one to watch as well. That's said some good things about South Carolina. Caleb Etienne, who's another big offensive lineman out of a Kansas junior college, who was formerly an Ole Miss commit a couple cycles back. Those are a few guys that come to mind that South Carolina, especially those first 3, have had some traction with at one point or another currently.
All right, so Jacob wants to know Marshawn Lloyd, if he is the starter, over or under 800 yards.
Oh,
man, if he's healthy, although that's 800 yards, y'all professional bookies or something like that?
Yeah, I know they're making some tough numbers.
The over unders have been very well set, I gotta say. I'm actually, I think I'm going against Chris on the touchdowns, on the passing touchdowns.
Okay.
For QB1, I'm going to say slightly under on that, but I'm going to say over on Marshawn Lloyd. And the reason is, dude, so the last week, I've been trying to get some team notes to put out to our subscribers. And when I ask about the question about the freshman, I can't get anybody to stop talking about Marshawn Lloyd and tell me about anybody else, because he's like that much of a complete everything you look for in a student athlete / football player. So I think Marshawn is that dude. I think Mike Bobo has shown he's going to give his guys at running back the football. Will Muschamp has talked up the offensive line. I see Brian has a question about that. We'll get to in a second. So I think over, man. I think Marshawn Lloyd is the absolute real deal.
Man, that is a tough question. I always like to go back, sort of like you did with Bentley, and looking back at Helinski's numbers from year one and then like Bentley's entire career, and go back and look at not even necessarily comparable players, but like comparable situations. So, like for me, I looked at Mike Davis, for example. Obviously, a really talented guy. He's still in the league. He was a really good player at South Carolina. Year one was, of his freshman year, he only got 52 carries. So he showed some good things, but he only had 275 yards. You look at his next two on some good offensive teams. Now, I mean, I don't think we should project this year's Gamecock offense until they prove it to be as good as the 2012 or 13 or 14 versions that had some, put up some good numbers, had some excellent players on it. But 2013, Mike Davis had 1183. 2014, he had 982, playing in 12 and 13 games respectively. So, given that, even if the offense as a whole isn't as good, my other question is how are you splitting carries? I think Lloyd's good enough to do that, though. So I am going to go over. I think he'll have a couple 100-yard games sprinkled in there, maybe even better. And I think he'll hit that mark. Is he going to be 1,000-yard rusher? That might be a little rich for me in year one. Although, would I be shocked or something? No, it wouldn't be some huge shock. I think he's really, really good. But I'll go over 800.
Well, and the list of guys who have actually had 1,000-yard seasons in South Carolina program history, I don't think is a very long list. Like that's a tough bar to clear, especially when everybody's splitting carries. But I think we've got a question down below here about Lloyd and who will sort of be the next guy in line. But when your first guy is that good, which I just think he's gonna be, you got to give him, get him the rock. So all right, so Jay Reeves has come back and said if there's 20 touchdowns passing, the assumption would be that the receivers have made some plays and stepped up for you. So who is the breakout wide receiver other than Shi Smith, with Shi in this scenario being the number one guy? Who steps up alongside Shi at receiver? And we've talked about this quite a bit, I would say, in terms of all the guys who could possibly step up, Chris. So let's go ahead. Let's call our shots. Who is the second leading receiver for South Carolina? And I'm going to go ahead and say that it cannot be a tight end, because I actually think there's a very real chance that Nick Muse is your number two receiver statistically. So I think as far as that goes, I think there's a good chance that Muse has a big year in the passing game just because it's needed. Now, who's the number two statistical guy as an actual wide receiver? If you had to pick, obviously you got Ortre Smith as a possibility, Xavier Legette as a possibility, Kerryon Joyner, Josh Van, Rico Powers, as a freshman, Jakari Caldwell as a freshman. There's some options. It's just really hard to predict which guy it's going to be.
And that's a good point about Muse too. Look at last year, at Colorado State, and Mike Bobo, his top two receivers, were Warren Jackson and Dante Wright, but Trey McBride wasn't far behind Dante Wright. Dante Wright was number two guy. Trey McBride, a tight end, only had 13 less catches. He had 45 catches as a tight end. So I wouldn't rule that out either, especially with some of the questions. Going with just a receiver, man, I go with Xavier Legette just because of the upside. I think that, he's a big kid that can run. He's got that sort of big play ability, that sort of, call it the jump ball ability. He can stretch a defense. he's a sort of a physical presence where he can make plays down the sideline or over the middle for you along the sideline. Maybe make some things happen after the catch. So that's who I would go with. It's really a projection, just like it is for anybody, because they don't have that proven, they don't even have the proven number one right now, but that would be my pick.
Yeah, I think I would go there as well, man. I love to go with somebody different, but I think he's the guy. He's the guy with the upside at that spot that, frankly, they need that to be the answer. So who's the starting 3 wide receivers? That means Shi Smith, Xavier Legette. Who's the third guy on the field? Ortre, Carry-On, Josh Vann. Or is it one of the freshmen?
Are we playing Shy inside or in the slot? Outside or in the slot? Good question.
Either
That
one.
Shape it a little bit for me.
I think that depends on which of those guys is the third best receiver.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Shy, I got the impression that maybe they want to, use Shy a little bit more outside to stretch the field.
Yeah.
But you're going to have to do what puts – if it's Ortre Smith and Xavier Legette are your other 2 best receivers, you probably just leave Shy inside of the slot where he's played most of his career.
Definitely.
If it's Josh Vann, you probably put Shy outside, I think.
It's really tough, man, because I just at this point you just don't get the sense there's a ton of separation between all those guys, and that's why it's so difficult. We wouldn't even be having the conversation if they just had 1, 2, 3. Here's the guys, and they do. Here's the thing: I do think that a guy like Joyner and Ortre Smith and Josh Vann, even though he struggled last year, those guys still have some pretty significant upside. Ortre Smith had 30 catches as a freshman, so I would probably, just as a hunch, go with Josh Vann, but it could very easily be any of the other ones. And I guess I'm sort of gonna at some point might die on that hill, the Josh Vann hill, because I've just always been high on him as a prospect, and I realize that's controversial because he did have a sophomore slump and he did have some drop struggles. But if he can maybe hit his stride early and gain some confidence, I think even with the limited playmaking that he's shown at South Carolina so far, and some of that's limited chances, I think he's still shown some things. And so that's who I'd pick, but it could very easily be someone else and make me look really bad on that.
All right, let's hit a couple more questions, man. Then we're going to get out of here. We normally do an hour. Brian wants to know, how would you rate the guys' potential starting on the offensive line in regards to the rest of the SEC? Will Muschamp is very high on this offensive line. I think Jazz Turrentine coming in and still in the starting spot, at least right now, was huge for this line because it really gives them depth at tackle because, again, that's like Chris said, you're taking a guy you didn't necessarily have to, but now he's taking, a starting spot from some guys that they're really high on, which would be like a Jalen Nichols or a Ja'Kai Moore. It allows you to move Za'Darius Hutchinson back to guard, which is his better spot. That then allows you – I tend to think there's a very real chance that this starting front is Turrentine at left tackle, Dylan Wanham at right tackle, Jordan Rhodes and Hutchinson at guard, and Jovan Gwynn at center. I think that might end up actually being your best 5 guys. We'll see if it plays out that way or not, but I could see that happening. So where is it as far as the rest of the SEC? I don't know if I'm the guy to answer that. I don't know enough about what the rest of the SEC has coming back. All I know is that South Carolina thinks they have a lot to like on their offensive line. From my perspective, I also think we got to see it because the offensive line really showed us a lot at some points last year and then just absolutely struggled down the stretch. So with some of that play calling, I don't know, were guys worn down and banged up or something? I don't know, but I've never seen a line just really dominate in the running game at some point. And it was almost like once teams figured it out, how to sort of stop them, then it was over. So I'm kind of wait and see, but I do know that the staff seems really excited about this line.
Yeah, and a lot of people, it's almost become a term that people have sort of made fun of. Like a couple I don't remember when it was, if it was last season. And so it sort of repeated itself when Muschamp says that the line's the strength of the team. Maybe it's 2017. You have to put that through the filter because the one year that Muschamp said it, the rest of the offense was very unproven. And so when you say a group is the strength of the team, that's not the same as saying this is an elite group, but now he seemed to take that further, and they really seem to be happy about the depth and the athleticism and some of the talent they have there. Matching it up against the rest of the SEC. Look, I really like some of the young players that Tennessee has, like at tackle. Kentucky has, I think, for the past few years, have had an underrated offensive line, and they've got some experience coming back to where they've got a chance to be pretty tough. South Carolina dominated that matchup last year, but they'd also dominated Georgia, and Georgia should be pretty good up front too. I'm not as high on Florida offensive line wise. Vandy, Missouri lost a couple pieces. So I would say, just looking at the East, I think South Carolina's in that top half probably. You take a few other SEC, SEC West teams, they've obviously got some talent on that side with Alabama, LSU, even though they lost some guys. I would probably, without completely studying it, I mean, heck, not spring practice didn't even finish in the SEC. So there's a lot to still be resolved even on those other squads about what they have coming back. But, conservatively, I think top half of the SEC is not an unfair projection, for this offensive line. Now, that doesn't mean top half of the SEC offense. We're talking about just position group of the offensive line. And I totally agree with you, Wes. I think there's a lot of moving parts that contributed to the O-line struggling at the end of the last season.
All right, so let's hit a couple more questions, then we'll get out of here. Both actually pertain to Zaquandre White, JUCO running back, arguably the number one JUCO running back in the country. First, from David, any news on Zaquandre White? The latest news we heard was mid-July. That was actually a little bit earlier than Muschamp had originally said, as far as him getting on campus. So I think that's a positive. If they can go ahead and get him in mid-July, get him a couple of weeks to sort of get settled in, that'd be better than obviously getting out there and having to go practice with the team when you're kind of brand new and getting back in football shape. Not that 2 weeks is going to change, a ton, but every little bit helps. And Wesley says, if Marshawn Lloyd is the starter, who will spell him when he comes out, talking game one, like right off the bat, not later on in the season. So basically, if we're assuming Lloyd is one, who is the number 2 running back this year?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I think on-campus guys, you get Kevin Harris and Deshaun Fenwick back. Zaquandre Wright coming in, Rashad Amos coming back, who's, I think, not – we've said this a lot, Wes, probably not talked about enough. From a talent perspective, I feel like it's Zaquandre. How ready is he? I'm not sure. I think he does play some this season as long as he gets on campus in a reasonable time frame, not right up against, right way into August or something like that. I guess I would go out on a limb and say Zaquandre, or maybe it's not on a limb, but that's another projection. Not super comfortable with it.
Yeah, you know what, man, I'm going to say Kevin Harris. I'm high on Zaquandre. Again, I'm standing on the table for Rashad Amos. I think he's going to play more than people suspect this year. But I think just with White, the uncertainty about getting in and trying to get in football shape is just tough, man. So that's why I think talent-wise, if you'd have asked me game 7, I think I would agree and go White. But, I think as far as game 1, assuming he can get himself to that point where he's fully healthy, Kevin Harris has dealt with some injuries so far in his career. That's slowed him up. But I think you go with the guy who's played a little bit and maybe knows the scheme a little bit better, big kid. And if I'm sort of using that, basically it would come down to Harris or Fenwick for me. And I think you'd probably give Harris the edge there just based on what I've heard as far as, how the staff feels. So, yeah, I think, these are still – we can predict them all we want, but these are still questions that are going to have to be answered during, fall practice, and guys are going to have to win jobs, and there's always surprises about who steps up and who doesn't. So as much as this stuff is covered, even as detailed as it is covered these days, you still just don't know until, until you see it play out. So, all right, y'all, we're about done here, but man, Chris, some bad news on Twitter. I don't know if you saw this, but Ian Rappaport reporting that Deebo Samuel broke his foot on Tuesday.
Yep.
Throwing session with teammates in Nashville. He's going to have surgery today. As a Jones fracture. I'm not familiar with that, what it means, but he should be able to be back on the field early in the season, according to Rappaport. But, man, hate that for Deebo. Obviously, injuries were a major part of his story at South Carolina, and I hate that it is popping up again.
It is, man. You've seen what he can do when he stays healthy. And I mean, he had the broken leg, in the Kentucky game in 2017. And that was a huge bummer, lost the season there, but he did have some injury concerns, at South Carolina with the breaks. Doesn't seem like there's a lot you can do about it. So it's an unfortunate type thing, but I guess if there's a positive to be taken away, it happens now. And so hopefully he can get back on the field, like you said, early in the season. And certainly he's been a guy that's really impressed, people from Chad Johnson to, his coaches, to a lot of people around the league. He's sort of put them on notice. So hopefully he can get back as soon as possible.
Yeah, man. God, I hate that for Deebo. Hopefully, like you said, hopefully he can make a quick, easy recovery and get back, because I think he was about to make a jump. And he was going to make a move into being, I think he's already actually starting to become one of the more well-liked receivers in the league, just the way he plays the game, but could move maybe up another tier as far as what he's respected as far as his ability at the NFL level. But hey, I appreciate everybody joining us. I hope you've enjoyed the chat again. Please hit the subscribe button on our YouTube. Please help us share this. And of course, we want you to check out GamecockCentral.com as well. Chris, you got any closing thoughts, man?
I don't. Not anything other than we really appreciate everybody tuning in and helping us continue to grow the YouTube channel. We enjoy the interaction with everybody. It's something we really like to do at Gamecock Central. So, keep up the questions, and we'll continue doing this regularly.
Yeah, this part's fun for me, man. We want to be as interactive as possible. We don't want to, I think something we can do that can make us different as a site and as a company. We don't want to just write a story and then you never hear from us. So that's a big part of our message board, is you being able to go on there and interact with us. But we want you to be able to hop on here and interact as well, and see us and see that we're, just regular human beings who enjoy following sports and covering sports and being around this stuff just like you. And so anytime we can get on here and just talk some ball, it's actually one of my favorite parts of my job. So we're going to keep doing these. And as long as y'all keep showing up, then we're actually going to keep doing them, I would say, even more once we get to an actual season and some real ball to talk about. So for Chris, I'm Wes. Again, y'all, we really, really appreciate it. Hit the subscribe button and follow us on Twitter as well, because that's when I tell everybody, when we'll be on here again. So tune in next week. We'll be back. For Chris, I'm Wes. Y'all have a good one.